Hi, my name is Taylor and I'm the Tempest Witch here on YouTube. If you're new here, hello, welcome, thanks for stopping by. This is kind of the best time for you to come in because today I'm going to be talking about my story and how I got into Norse paganism and honestly how I got here. So, let's tell some stories. The best place to start is my childhood. When I was a kid, I was part of an organization called the Sons of Norway, which is a heritage group based out of the entire United States, which is separated into districts, mine being District 5 in Wisconsin. At the time, anyway. Part of the perks of this heritage society is if you were a kid between the ages of 8 and 15, you could go to a heritage camp called Masimuru, which is where this story begins. Masimuru is a place that holds most of my fondest memories, and it is where I built a lot of lifelong friendships. It's where I picked up a love of storytelling. It's where I learned and started being interested in rune casting, and also where I learned a whole host of other life skills, honestly. Masamuru means much fun, and honestly, I feel like that is a pretty accurate description of how I view the camp. But part of the biggest takeaway is that we regularly got told different stories and myths about the Norse pantheon. And some of my favorite stories actually were told to me and my friends at this camp by Dag Rasmussen, which is delightful but also kind of tragic since he has since passed. But he was a wonderful storyteller, and some of his stories are actually preserved in books that he published, such as this, which is The Northern Path by Dag Rasmussen. And I think at some point I'm going to make videos of me reading some of the stories that he's written because they're so vivid and heartfelt, and they honor the essences of the stories that he was trying to convey, and I really appreciate his writing style. So, at some point, probably going to make that a video. Another major thing from Masamuru was that I was inducted into the Fellowship of Yggdrasil, which was the elite society of the camp, which was a place where you had to prove your dedication to walking the Northern Path, as we called it. So you could get points towards becoming inducted by learning extra things in the language classes, being really, really good at any of the Viking Olympics events that we did. So archery, spear casting, Neftoffel, if you know what that is, playing Kub, playing Knotlake, which is like a soccer lacrosse type thing. There's just lots of different ways. You can also do points for learning rune casting and learning what each of the runes actually means. Another is you can tell your own stories based on the Norse pantheon. Lots of different things, but I did my time, I got inducted, and I became an elite member of the Fellowship of Yggdrasil. When I was inducted into the Fellowship of Yggdrasil, I was inducted through a ceremony of fire. And during the ceremony, each inductee was given a rune, which is their life rune. It's meant to give you some sort of symbolic meaning for the rest of your life. And it did. It gave me a very clear message that took a while for me to acknowledge. So I got the rune Thurisaz, which is giant, but I translate it more as thorn. And the reason I translate it more that way is because the energy of this rune is the pride that comes in completion. The way I see it is, if you're going through a thorn bush because there's something on the other side that you want to obtain, but you only go halfway through and then give up, you've harmed yourself for no reason and no benefit. So, instead of quitting something halfway through, you might as well continue on all the way through. You know? In addition to just hearing the stories, I internalized what the gods were personified as. Because the gods are a personification of something. Odin is the personification of the pursuit of wisdom. Thor is the personification of the strength of a storm. Freya is the personification of strength and confidence. So if you take that internally, the gods don't seem as ethereal and otherworldly as some make them out to be. They're simply flawed, ancient beings that make mistakes and have downfalls, and like I said, they are flawed. But they are morally good. They might get bored, looking at you, Loki, but overall they try to do the right thing and what they feel is best. I started off as a Christian as a child, but the gods have always been a part of my life. I've heard Odin calling my name on the winds. I've heard Thor laughing with the crack of thunder. I have felt Freya's warm embrace when I'm feeling very self-conscious and completely unconfident that day. I've heard Frigg's kind, gentle words in the songs of songbirds. I see Balder in the sun. I feel Njord in the rush of the lake. The gods are all around me. The gods are always all around me, and I try my best to acknowledge them as much as I can. I only really started paying attention to the signs that the gods were trying to call me home when they became so abundant that I could no longer ignore them. What I've learned is the gods speak in patterns. If it's a one-off, it's probably not a sign, unless you specifically ask for a sign. But for the most part, the gods will always repeat in order to get your attention. The signs I started seeing were just corvids everywhere. Blackbirds, ravens, crows, blue jays. They're just everywhere. Everywhere I would go, there would be another one. And not silently, they would caw at me to get my attention so that I knew they were there. And that's kind of when I knew that it was time. I had played, I'd had my fun, I dabbled in the different sects of magic and being a pagan, but I knew where my heart and my loyalties lied, so I just fell back into them. A few years ago, when I was getting solidified in magic, because up until this point I've very much been along a magical path, but I wasn't really sure which direction I was going. Like most people, I started off as a Wiccan because that's where everyone begins. It's where most of the books are. It's where most of the knowledge lies. So that was my foot in the door. And then once I started reading and once I started acquiring more knowledge, I realized I just needed to come home. I've always connected with the Norse pantheon, and every other god, deity, angel being that I tried to associate with just didn't feel true to myself. Since I've accepted my path, I've really honed my skills towards being a vulva, which practices Seidr magic. In the old Viking tradition, women were the only ones who were able to practice magic because we were the only ones that were seen to be able to be seers. The reason that's a little bit more loosely accepted now is because Odin took the time to learn Seidr magic from Freya. And there are many stories of Odin being mocked and harassed for practicing woman magic. But as we've aged, I've realized that the gods don't stick very particularly to any gender, any sexual orientation, none of those really defining characteristics. They kind of ebb and flow in whichever direction suits them in the time. So, although Seidr is considered female magic, I feel like everyone can do it, but it's what resonated the most for me. Seidr magic is very earth-based. It is connecting to the land. It is understanding what the land provides and then utilizing that for your own benefits. It is working in harmony with the earth and the wilderness around you, rather than trying to force energies to do what you command. I personally have found that the more in tune I am with the surroundings of my life, the better I am at manifesting what I am attempting to do. One of the biggest draws I found in the Norse community is that many people start out as Christian, but they were always uncomfortable with bending the knee to a god they had never seen and never felt. And I kind of resonated with that. I'm very much one to question why things are the way they are instead of blindly accepting them, because things can always be changed, and I feel like if it moves with the time, it should change with the times. So, I walked away from the Christian God and started speaking with the Norse pantheon. And once I started seeing the signs and feeling them and truly connecting to the old ways, I started to be happy again. I realized that I appreciate gods who would rather have me stand eye to eye with them in order to embrace me, rather than bending the knee and proving my loyalty. I'm a very firm believer in the idea that gods are meant to be mentors and not praised as the almighty, flawless beings that some make them out to be. I embrace my gods with open arms and ask them to strengthen me in order to do what I need to. I don't ask them to give me or make something happen for me. Rather, I just ask for them to stand by my side as I do it myself. And that's been the best thing that could have happened to me. My gods are so old, and they've seen kingdoms rise and fall. They've seen armies come and go. They've seen people who are self-important rise to what they thought was God status and then end up dying because they're human. Now, a lot of people call and refer to the Norse pantheon and the practice of it Asatru in modern day, but I don't use that term because Asatru means the worship of the Asgardians and completely focuses on the Aesir and disregards the Vanir, which is totally misaligned from my practice, because the Vanir are the nature spirits, they're the nature gods, they're the ones that are very in harmony with the world around them. The Asgardians are very set in Asgard, so to ignore them would be to ignore half of myself and half of my faith, and that doesn't jive or align at all with what I'm trying to speak to. Asatru is kind of like the foot in the door, similar to Wicca when trying to get involved with the Norse pantheon and the Norse faith. But Norse paganism isn't a religion, it's a mindset in order to practice truly to yourself. The Northern Path is a way of life. It is a set of morals that we've all kind of decided and accepted in order to be the best versions of ourselves and honor our ancestors to the best of our abilities. Being a Norse pagan is just worshipping and practicing the old gods and the old ways. It's just a way of life. I wouldn't call it a religion because there aren't a lot of practices that are heavily accepted, because our history is so scattered and so Christian influenced, because that's how most of it was documented. What I'm saying is, Norse pagans don't practice the same. This is just my personal experience and my personal story, and my story is going to be different than the next person's. But as long as we're all trying our best to learn as much as possible, as is the first creed of our practice, I think we're all doing things just fine. And in recent years, I've found that pagans are very umbrella termed group of people, right? But Norse pagans specifically are kind of ostracized from some of it because we have so many white supremacists and it's so bad, but there are good people like myself in this community who are trying to fight back against those stigmas, because all pagans are cousins. We all worship and practice these taboos that society has deemed undesirable. So, if you're a pagan, hi cousin. Glad you could be here. Like I said in my first video, I have friends of every practice, of every walk of life, and I adore all of them because they teach me something new every time we talk. I don't go into this with elitism or any kind of gatekeeping. Rather, I'd like to keep the doors and the gates wide open because I want more people to feel comfortable here. I want more people to feel comfortable exploring and learning about the Norse pantheon and then going, hey, this isn't for me, but I really like your stories. I want this to be a welcoming and inviting place for everyone to feel comfortable. So, that's all for today. If you liked this video, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do all of those things. But until next time, Skull.